We are live here on Blooped with Velas and Vanessa. Our little podcast here is a budding advocacy for protecting women and children from high control systems, cults, and that can include religion. It can include a marriage. It can include politics. It can include I don't know how you guys want to call it, but the idea that a society can be cultic. So we're talking about people who are exiting these systems and finding their voice, finding their agency, and living a life that they truly want. So I'm going to let Velas jump in here. I'm going to ask her to jump in here and invite and tell you about our guest. And she will also introduce our topic today, which is banning child marriage. And we're going to kind of go into that. Now, I just want to give a little caveat that the reason we're doing this right now is because the three of us have had an experience with child marriage. And both Velas and Donna are strong, active advocates against it. And they have some really amazing, astounding news to share with you all. I'm learning on this too. So Velas, jump in, my friend.
Well, we've all been tracking my story, but I'm a little bit of a fangirl here. Donna Simmons has been fighting the good fight in Kentucky, and she has an amazing story herself, which we're going to hear a little bit about, and then she's going to tell us a little bit about what's going on nationally with all of the current statuses of the states. And I did post earlier today on Substack sort of where we are at this moment as far as state to state. And I'm just so grateful that you agreed to come on here and talk with us. I think you're an amazing advocate. You're a powerhouse. You're brave. You're vulnerable. You're strong, and you don't stop fighting. And I just want to be you when I grow up. But you're younger than me, so I'm going to have to go back some decades. So, please tell us. Please introduce yourself as you want us to know how you are, who you are, what you do, and whatnot.
And then we'll go. Thank you so much, Velas and Vanessa. And just so you know, it's a total mutual admiration society because I love learning about you and all the incredible work that you've done as well. And my goodness, what a cool podcast you all have too. Like, what a great way to raise awareness on issues that are so meaningful. So yes, for everyone, I am Donna Simmons. I am a survivor leader and advocate. I'm also the founder of the Revive Collective. And through my nonprofit organization, we work to break generational cycles of harm so that we can basically rewrite the legacies that we were handed. And that's one of the reasons that I'm so active in the fight to end child marriage in our country, and especially right now focused on my home state of Kentucky. And my story really starts a couple generations back within my own family. And that's one of the reasons I am so focused on breaking those generational cycles. If I look at my mother's generation specifically, she was 13 years old when she was married off. And this is just after she completed the 8th grade in this tiny little town in Kentucky called McQuarrie County. And at the time that she was married, my dad was a grown man who already had 2 sons from his first marriage and had already served in the Korean War. And so, that just shows you the age disparity and that power imbalance that was between them. And so when my mother married, she immediately had to take on motherhood of these 2 small boys when she was still just a child herself. And again, wasn't even able to go past the 8th grade. And so she herself grew up, being a soldier's wife. They still were living in poverty and with that lack of education, and then her own history of abuse from when she was younger, and having grown up in just some really difficult situations, she ended up having a lot of mental health concerns herself. And that manifested itself towards me in the form of a lot of abuse. And so, she was born in the generation that likes to say, spare the rod, spoil the child. I hate that saying, but unfortunately, it's one that's very common for my age and up. I'm sure many of us have heard those over the years. And so she would use a belt to beat me if I did a small mistake, like spilling a carton of milk or something like that. So I really grew up in a constant state of fear. And I also very much felt that no matter what I did, it was never going to be enough, because I was always there to serve my mom. I was always there to try to get her approval, even though I knew I never could through any action that I took. So flash forward a few years into my early childhood. I was abused by my father sexually. When I disclosed this to my mom, I was blamed for it and I was shunned. And so, flash forward a few more years, and my dad ended up being diagnosed with advanced stage lung cancer when I was 12. And at that time, it was so advanced that they gave him 6 months to live. He ended up making it 8. My mom disappeared during that time. She was gone more times than not. So I was left to take care of my dad. I had to feed him mashed up foods. I had to change his Depends. I had to make sure he had sponge baths, all these things that no 12, 13-year-old child should ever bear. So when he did end up passing, then I went off the deep end in my own right. I'd had so much trauma. I had just gotten through having to take care of a man who was one of my abusers. My mother, of course, was very neglectful and abusive. And so that resulted when I was 14 in me being admitted to a behavioral health facility. And I wish I could tell you, oh, that's where I got help and everything improved from there. But unfortunately, that was just the next stepping stone in my story of abuse and exploitation. And at that time, I met a 29-year-old mental health technician that worked at that facility. Again, I was 14. He started grooming me in that facility. And when I was released, my mother consented to me having a dating relationship with him. And I always use quotes when I say that, because as we know, as adult women, there's nothing dating about that. It is a predatory situation.
Yeah.
So 2 years into that, my mother signed me over to marry him. And he used that marriage license to evade a statutory rape charge. He also used it as a cover to be able to exploit me in a strip club. As a result of that marriage, I didn't have access to a domestic violence shelter because I wasn't an adult. I could not access CPS services because I was not considered a child still. I couldn't enter into an apartment lease because I couldn't sign a contract, even though I was emancipated, which, as we know, is meaningless, right? And there were just so many hurdles. I ended up having to drop out of the 10th grade. When I gave birth to my child and I finally was able to leave my perpetrator, the judge gave him custody of my daughter because he was in his 30s and appeared to be financially stable, whereas I was not. And not only that, but he ordered me to pay him child support. So here's another way to completely handicap me from being able to grow during those early years. So all of those obstacles, all of those experiences led me for so many years to carry such a load of shame on my shoulders and feeling like I was not worthy. I was constantly on the verge of being ostracized by my peers, by my colleagues, by society in general, until finally I woke up in my early 30s and realized that my perpetrator's crimes against me are not my shame to carry, nor is the system's failures and the way that the system perpetuates these cycles of harm. That is not our shame to carry either. And so that's the reason that I decided to be bold and brave and finally own my story publicly and advocate for change. And that's one of the reasons that I am here with you all today.
I feel like we just need to take a breath and let all of that land. And for anyone who's listening, you probably had so many different emotions coming up while you're listening to this, and so many questions and like, wait, but what and when and how in the hell and what, and is he dead now? And is your daughter okay? So for everybody, just take a breath. That's a big deal. Thank you so much for sharing that and being so vulnerable and brave and doing that. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Velas, did you have some questions? I don't want to. We're new at doing 3 people on here, so
Yeah. I was so inspired by your testimony. I just found your ability to eloquently share so well. Was so brave. How long have you been doing advocacy work?
For 10 years now. I started back in 2016 by connecting with the United Nations Association here in Kentucky. And they were doing a lot of work on human trafficking. And it was really through that and being able to realize that what had happened to me when, I was a teenager was not my fault, but it was having been trafficked by a person that took advantage of my vulnerabilities. That was really cathartic for me. And so I had so much healing that came up from that experience. And then from there, doors just kept opening. It was like the universe just kept, opening these windows here and doors over here. And so I've been very active in a lot of instances, and then a little less when I need to step back and take a break, which is also really important in this line of work.
And you said something interesting to me, not the first time I've heard it, but the fact that you said it, and I've heard it so much recently, that when you left your child marriage when you were 19 years old, mm-hmm. and you didn't really realize that the shame wasn't yours to carry, or none of that was your fault until you were in your 30s.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. And so much of that is the way that society measures our success as people, right? And, all through school, I had gotten very good grades despite all the adversity that I had at home. My grades were something I could very much control. And I ended up losing a very substantial scholarship award when I was forced to drop out of 10th grade. So, that's something that always kind of haunted me, but I was determined to go back to school. But when you have, just simple questions that there's water cooler talk, like, oh, well, where did you graduate high school? And you can't answer that honestly, because what do I tell people? Well, actually, I dropped out before I completed 10th grade because I was married off and I had to start working and, all these things. It is very isolating. And then the other part, in my story as a trafficking survivor, what do you tell people about your first job, right? When it comes to, being 18, how do you tell people, oh yeah, I had to work in a strip club for a while. And, this is how I learned to manage money. And this is, like, those are things that haunt you because there's such a stigma that is associated with that. And being able to finally throw off the veil of that shame is what, for one thing, opens doors to our own healing, but it also almost gives permission to other survivors to own their experiences and really tap into how to transform those from that deep pain into purpose that is going to help move our society forward.
Yeah.
Donna, I have a quick question. At what point did you know that what you were experiencing wasn't right or normal? How old were you, and what was that like moment where you knew something could be better or different?
Yeah. Well, there were a few. And I will say that I write about a lot of the detail itself in my book, Ashes to Flame. I'll give just kind of an overview here without going into too much detail, because as a trigger warning, again, having experienced childhood sexual abuse, that was something that, very much stood out to me. Again, my perpetrator was a mental health technician, so he had access to all my information. He knew everything that I had disclosed in therapy and very much used that against me. One of the moments that I realized that this guy was a monster but felt completely trapped was when he would talk about the things he knew I experienced as a young child in detail. and say things like, well, that's your fault because you were a hot little girl, or something like that. These very just atrocious things that made me feel so confused, would send me right back to that confused emotional state as a 5-year-old. And, he counted on that to be able to keep me locked in this position where he could control every action I took. The final straw, though, for me was when I had just given birth to my daughter. I was 18 when she was born. I just turned 18. And a few months into that, she was on the floor playing on her tummy. He was trying to pressure me into something that I refused to indulge. And in response, he got on top of me on the floor and started choking me. And she saw this. And as a baby, she started laughing. And that clicked something in my brain because, as an infant, all she sees is her parents playing or wrestling. She doesn't realize that this is dangerous. But I realized in that moment that if I didn't get away, she was going to grow up normalizing that type of behavior. And so that was really the huge light bulb that showed me that I had to find some way to brave up and do whatever it took to get out of that situation.
Thank you. Yeah.
I've seen that in a lot of women where they look at their children, because I think as women, and I'm speaking for me at least, we don't hold any self-value in those moments because we've been raised for so long to believe that we didn't have any value.
Right.
And then you suddenly look at your child who you believe has immense value, and you look at yourself through their eyes and go, okay, I got to do better. I have to pull myself out of this for this person who I believe in, because we didn't believe enough in ourselves to do it for ourselves.
Exactly.
Oh, absolutely. And, I can say that about the experience I had with my oldest daughter that I just shared. I can also share that about, my younger daughter who will be turning 19 a few months from now. And, my oldest daughter, like I said, the judge ended up awarding my perpetrator custody. So she had to grow up feeling like her mom abandoned her, basically. So she certainly has that ongoing trauma. And she and I were both robbed of the opportunity to have that relationship. With my younger daughter, and she was with me the entire time. We built a very close relationship. And I can definitely say, I think that one of the propelling factors for my own healing was being able to see, even the challenges that she would go through, either through me not being my best self because I was still healing, or experiences that, she had in other realms, and being able to figure out how to be responsive in the same way that I would have needed when I was younger. And I certainly was not perfect about that. I tripped up many times, but being able to see, this small innocent child that has needs and is so lovable unconditionally, and realize that we are all worthy of that. And if we're not provided that in our youth, that's not a reflection on us. It's a reflection on the limited capacity of the adults in our life to give to us and take care of us.
Yeah. Wow, that's really powerfully said, to just really make sure, like, it sounds like part of the work you're doing too is flipping the script. And I know, Velas, you've said this too, is making sure that the people who have been abused really dial in that it's not your shame, it's the abuser. That's the person that's responsible. And they do have a limited capacity, but it's still not yours to carry.
Right.
And to really delineate what that looks like.
Yeah. And I'm not, I feel that victims, survivors, people who have found themselves in an oppressed situation, they don't owe the world anything. They don't owe the world an explanation. They don't have to go to the police. They don't have to explain to their abuser. They don't have to, nothing. However, I just want them to release to know they have permission to let go of that shame. It's not yours. You don't have to put it, you don't have to hold that person accountable. You don't have to be mad at everybody, anybody. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying stop carrying it. Just put it down. It's okay. You can heal as long as you need, however you need, whatever you got to do. But we need to start as a society acknowledging that if somebody broke into my house and stole the television off my wall, I shouldn't be ashamed to say, hey, somebody stole my television. I didn't do it.
Yeah.
I am not the bad guy in the scenario.
So, and it's too that as we talk, like both of you are very active in your advocacy. And something you said earlier, Donna, was, and I might be paraphrasing, and we've all talked about this to some degree, but the more we talk about it, we come on here and we share stories, whether it's here or your book or whatever. You said the word isolation earlier, and I never actually connected with the word of feeling isolated, but until you said it, it just clicked, like how isolated I felt growing up, how isolated I felt in this weird child marriage. I didn't get married, but I had this proposition when I was 12. I had my son at 16. I've been through all these things. I never actually connected the dots on how isolated I have felt in my life because of these things. And it's probably the reason that I'm passionate about women getting together and talking, because there's something that happens in this group, right? And it's whether you're listening to it or you're doing something like we're all doing, some advocacy work where you don't feel so isolated. You don't feel so alone. And to me, that's really the first place I started to release the shame. It was like, oh, the weight started to go off when I knew that I wasn't alone in this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
As long as they know they are not alone and that somebody else has navigated this somehow, they might find some hope of, okay, I can survive this, or I've survived worse. I can survive the recovery of this.
And you can be free. You can find your sort of sense of self, right? And some sense of freedom. Yeah, that's really powerful.
And, society puts so much pressure on women to be in competition with each other. And that's echoed through so many different realms of our lives. And I think, what you said about being able to get a group of women together to be able to talk about these issues, when we can find that sense of sisterhood and we can find that sense of relatability, even though, we don't have the exact same experiences, there are a lot of common threads between us that we can relate to. And a lot of times that could be as, simple as the emotion that we experience in response to the situations that we were placed in. But when we're able to have these brave conversations, then that sense of competition starts to dissolve, and we're able to see each other as human beings that are standing beside each other in this push to really benefit humanity and to really be able to rewrite the legacies that we were handed by people that did not have the capacity for growth during their time on this planet.
Right.
That's really powerful. And I think you're right. It's sorry, I lost my thought here. I was just going to say that it's such a powerful way to say it and to rewrite our legacy. I think about my grandmother. I don't know about you, Vilas, what your grandmother's past were, but there were women who didn't want to be married, who were abused, who had these alcoholic husbands and these very tragic situations. My mother-in-law, so to speak, Chris's mom, she was sold off by her parents in England to a family in Canada when she was very young. She was sold.
Yeah.
And so what I wanted to say is, this is where I lost my train of thought. Vilas and I grew up in a kind of an Indian sort of ish culture, American Indian, right? We grew up in Kentucky. So as we're talking about these things, and for people who are listening, this isn't something that happens in a foreign country.
Right.
This is the stuff that's happening right here under our noses in modern America. And I don't think people understand that there are laws that support child marriage in the United States today in 2026. And this is what the two of you are helping to stop. So I'd love to just acknowledge that and to say, okay, tell us what the two of you are up to and the changes that you both are impacting. Again, modern USA 2026. Something happened last week that just was an earthquake in the moral decay of this particular area of modern life. So yeah, I'd love to hear what you two are up to and what happened last week. So,
well, Donna, why don't you share an overview of where we are just nationally?
Okay, yeah, definitely. So, and just to give a little bit of background for those that are listening that may not be familiar with the statistics around child marriage, if we look at data going back to the year 2000, so, pretty recent period of time, in the United States of America, there have been over 300,000 cases of child marriage that have occurred. And I can tell you that a lot of times when people hear that number, they think, oh, well, that's just this Romeo Juliet type thing where two 16-year-olds are getting married. And unfortunately, that is not what the data shows. And so many of those cases, it was between a person that was underage and a grown adult, which again creates that power imbalance. And so there's been a national push really over the past 10, 11 years to end child marriage in our country. And the way that our Constitution works here in America, it has to be state by state. They cannot pass, or so we've been told, a federal law cannot be enacted that all states have to adhere to. So what that means is that in the past 10, 11 years, we have had 16 of our 50 states that have passed legislation to say there is an age 18, bright line, absolutely no exceptions, but the remaining 34 states still allow exceptions. And some states have absolutely no minimum age for marriage. And this is one of the reasons that this year is so important on a national level. Thanks to survivor leaders that Vilas and I are connected with through an amazing organization, Tahirih Justice Center, that is doing incredible work. They are really leading the charge. And so we have the state of Oklahoma as well as Ohio this year that passed meaningful legislative reform out of their Senate chambers in order to be able to end child marriage completely in those two states. So, and we're continuing to see progress be made in other areas as well. I'll get to Kentucky here in a little bit. But just being able to see those legislative victories, that huge progress. And of course, session's not completely over yet. We've still got to get through those final hurdles. But to be able to see the fact that it's finally starting to click with our, members of the legislatures is very refreshing.
Can I ask you, what is it that needed to click? Like, why wouldn't this have clicked in 2000, right? Like, what's the thing that people they want their 21-year-old to marry a 16-year-old or a 30-year-old to marry their 8-year-old? Like, what's the thing?
Well, what I have heard as an argument for the past 10 years of being in this advocacy work is, what if they get pregnant? And what I don't think a lot of people realize, because they romanticize this idea of this pregnant teenager marrying this person, regardless of if it's another teenager or an adult, they romanticize this idea that somehow is in the best interest for that, in most cases, young female and the child. But what we see is that as a minor, and again, this is echoed in my experience, you have more limited protections as a married minor than you do as a child that is pregnant, because at least that way you have access to child protective services. When you are a married minor and you're emancipated without enumerated rights, you can't go to a domestic violence shelter, nor can you access child protective services. You can't consent to your own medical care either. So, these are huge hurdles Oh, absolutely.
Emancipation creates a lot of gray areas.
Exactly.
I didn't know any of this. Okay. So this is why you were just between a rock and a hard place. There was nothing that could help you. And not only did it not help you, it actually held you back, stopped you from accessing services you needed, your daughter need, all the things that you actually would have helped you maybe get through the situation. You had no access or support.
Exactly. And,
so sorry.
no, you're fine.
I agree with you about this idea of a fantasy, right? That people romanticize a pregnant teenage girl with an older person thinking that's the salvation. I'm curious what the domestic violence rates are for those kinds of imbalanced marriages. And I'm going to assume that they're extraordinarily high and that it actually sets a woman back economically even more rather than help her.
Oh, significantly. Yes. And, Velas, please feel free to jump in if you have additional statistics as well. But I mean, for intimate partner violence for minors that are married, they are at a 4 times more likely risk to experience that intimate partner violence. And they're also substantially more at risk for experiencing suicidality later on down the road because they don't have access to sustainable resources to be able to get help, either to get out of the situation or for their own mental health treatment.
Mm-hmm. And I would imagine it impacts whether or not they continue high school or go on to college, impacts the abuse cycle that continues with the child.
Mm-hmm.
So,
it does. It impacts their ability to get an education. It impacts their ability to therefore find meaningful work. So now they're beholden to, like, they're in a financially abusive situation because they don't have any money, and they're relying on their spouse, their older spouse, who is in control of everything, their entire existence. They have no agency. And the only thing I would like to add on to, aside from all of the detriments that it causes these young girls and young boys, I'm not, we're not, it can happen to young boys. It just doesn't that often. It's usually an older man and a younger girl. But I want to
these laws you're talking about would protect the boys and the girls.
Of course. And but the most important part that I always want to say, because I always want to say the quiet thing out loud, it is state sanctioned statutory rape.
Mm-hmm.
It is the state saying, I'm cool with that man raping that child as long as you have this piece of paper.
Mm-hmm.
What is making them justify? I'm so curious about the psychology. What is it that they're trying to protect in doing that? Because it's not the kid and it's not the baby or the child that's born of that imbalance. What are they trying to, or what have they justified not turning this over 100 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, there is no valid justification for it, aside from the fact that we live in a patriarchal society. I mean, I'm going to use that word, right? And I know a lot of times people hear that and it gets shut down, their eyes glaze over, what have you. It's true. We live in a society that places greater emphasis on protecting those that prey on the vulnerable rather than the children that, guess what, are growing up to be our next generation. And that is where it has to stop. And Velas was spot on. I mean, and that's what I say about my perpetrator as well. We allow pedophiles to hide their offenses behind a marriage license. And my goodness, I can tell you all kinds of data on Kentucky specifically that reinforces that.
Yeah. So I would imagine, I'm not going to place blame where it doesn't belong, but I would imagine those in power have family systems and traditions that they've been personally impacted by that allowed this. So in changing these laws, it really was also maybe changing family culture, family structure, very personal things to people. And I don't know, is it a younger generation that is voting against this? Like, what is the dynamic that shifted that it allowed this to move forward?
Mhm.
Donna, would you like to tell us a little bit about that person that went back on her vote?
Yes,
We're
absolutely.
going to jump right into Kentucky because this is a good example.
Okay.
Exactly. So during last week, we had, when the bill was moving through the chambers in Kentucky, it passed our Senate unanimously. We have a Senate sponsor who is absolutely wonderful. Her name's Julie Rocky Adams. I really wish that she would run for a seat in the federal legislature because we need her there. Would hate to see her go from Kentucky. But she, got it through the Senate. We're golden there. Then it moved through the House. I sat in the House committee and testified, and one of the representatives asked a lot of questions around emancipation, which we've talked about, and around a pregnancy exception, talking specifically about 16-year-olds, to which our sponsor and myself very much educated what the real life experience is compared to the legal jargon that people say. And whereas she voted yes in committee, we got a unanimous vote out of committee. That same evening, she turned around and produced an amendment on our bill that would worsen the legislation from what it is right now in Kentucky. We had got it brought up to a minimum age of 17 back in 2018. And her proposal was to take it down to 16 with a pregnancy exception. And of course, we were all devastated and floored and felt so betrayed by this female legislator who had said one thing and then behind closed doors went, to feed whatever internalized misogyny she was experiencing. Yeah. And what ended up happening between all of the survivor voices reaching out to her directly, I'm sure social media pressure also had something to do with it. I know several of us posted videos calling her out specifically, and the fact that we have a phenomenal bill sponsor who also would not let this go.
No small measure on your voice.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you
very loud, and it was heard.
Thank you. But she ended up rescinding the amendment. And so, yes. And I get goosebumps as I say this because it goes right back to what we were all talking about earlier of being able to remove that cloak of shame and recognize how powerful our voices can be when we are able to unite and say, the shame is not mine to carry. I'm going to pet it on the perpetrator and I'm going to pet it on the systems that perpetuate these harms.
Another breath moment. Like, that is massive. Power to the people.
For sure.
And congratulations. And wow, this is where, the social pressure piece, I think, is so powerful. And I just hope that people take away that whatever the issues are that are coming up, whether it's child marriage or other, taboo type of things, is be brave anyways. You might feel shame. Don't wait till that's gone to speak up. Don't wait till the shame or the guilt or whatever you're feeling is gone to take action, because it worked. Everybody standing up and speaking up together is amazing, amazing, amazing. So what does that mean for the state of Kentucky now?
So we are now waiting for it to be heard on the House floor. We are in what's called a veto recess period right now for the next several days, in which the bills that have been passed, the governor has this next several days to either veto or, to sign into law. And then after that veto recess period stops, there are 2 days left of our legislature. And so we anticipate that we're going to be on orders of the day the next day that the legislature reconvenes. And so we should see it pass at that time. I am very confident that Governor Beshear here in Kentucky will sign this into law, no problem. I worked with him when he was Attorney General on this issue, and he was instrumental in helping us get it at least moved to age 17 at that point, since they, our legislature wouldn't accept the age 18 bright line at that time. So
what has changed then? It's 18? and over.
Yes. 18, no exceptions.
What happens to a girl who gets pregnant in one of these situations at 16 and 18? And what happens to the older person in the relationship?
So right now, and this is one of the reasons that we decided to revisit this bill, because when we first addressed this back in 2018, there was no minimum age for marriage. And at that time, when we pulled the data, we found, just as an example, there was a 13-year-old girl pregnant and married off by a judge to a 33-year-old man.
Even though that's not the floor age.
Yeah. Well, at that time, there wasn't a floor age.
Oh, there wasn't. Oh, okay.
Yeah, prior to 2018.
Okay.
But what happened after that, and I'm glad you brought that up, because even though we changed the law to be the floor age of 17 in 2018, and we established a judicial criteria process where a judge would have to assess and approve to make sure there was no predatory situation, there wasn't an age disparity of greater than 4 years, so on and so forth. When I pulled the data, because I requested this from the Department of Vital Statistics in April of last year, and we found that whereas the numbers dropped overall, there are judges and clerks that are not following the law. So we have instances in which a child was married to an adult where there was such a significant age gap, and I'm talking 10, 12 years, that age gap itself violates our age of consent laws. And so when we realized with this exception, it is continuing to put children in harm's way, that's when Senator Rocky Adams and I decided, okay, this is the year to really push for that age 18 bright line.
Okay. I have a weird question. And so I don't know the answer is simple. There are in your teen years, and if you come from an abusive family and a hardship, you might view marriage to your 19-year-old boyfriend or your 18-year-old boyfriend. You have that love. I mean, I don't know, you guys probably fell in love hard with your boyfriends too, right? Like I wanted to marry my boyfriend when I was 14 and he was older than me. He was 4 years older than me. What education is there or support is there for girls? I'm just being general, right? Because I'm sure there's boys, but who might view marriage as an escape from their horrific, shitty, downtrodden, abusive, sexually abusive, drunk, alcoholic dad and mom, whatever. Mm-hmm. Now they can't get married and they don't know how to get out of the situation where the marriage might have been viewed as a savior, not always, something horrifying. What education or support is there to help young girls in these situations know their resources, know their options, and themselves learn to think about their savior as themselves or different? Like, I don't know. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You go ahead, Ross. It looks like I'll jump in.
They're really trying to find love and support.
Well, I think the voices that we are elevating right now are helping. The fact that we're out there screaming at the top of our lungs saying child marriage is exactly what I just said. Children getting married. It's a plaything. It rarely lasts. Right. There's no 17-year-old that is capable of taking care of a 14-year-old, no matter what sex either one of them are.
Exactly. I agree.
Marriage is an adult thing, just like alcohol is an adult thing. It is dangerous. There are power dynamics. There are being in love. That's the drunk part. No, you're drunk. Sober up and talk to me when you're 18.
Right.
I love that.
It's not about dripping with love, because marriage isn't about love. That's in the beginning where you're like, oh, you're so pretty. And that fades. And you're like, no, you are my person. You are my friend. You are my hero. You are my best friend. And that's not that part of Romeo and Juliet. Romeo and Juliet killed themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Nothing romantic about that.
Nothing romantic about that.
Into what is the state then going to help put in place more education programs and more support for girls and children, I'm just going to say, in these horrible situations, so that other resources are known, other advocacies are available to them.
It's the closing the loopholes part that I think matters most.
Yeah.
When you have loopholes, a judge or a clerk might be like, oh, there's a loophole. Let's see if we can just like squeeze you through this. And they don't care. They don't have to live with the consequences. They don't know. They're just there to sign. But closing the loophole and making 18 without exception makes it very clear. And then there's enforcement. And I know that I watched your testimony, and I know that there's like stuff around that where, but how do we enforce? And okay, but at least making the law clear, like, like again, drinking and driving, it's pretty clear. It's pretty crystal clear.
And then it forces the rest of society and the social systems to now come up with different solutions and different ways to help people. How about the church? How did the church respond? Is there pushback on the church? I mean, if someone gets pregnant in the church, they want to marry him off. Like, where does that play into this?
That's a really great question too. And honestly, it depends on the church. We have found we've had a ton of support from our Catholic community here in Louisville to end child marriage. And then we have, support from other sects of Christianity as well. But you have some organizations that, are faith-based, and yet what they proselytize is things that are very harmful and that honestly just reinforce the oppression of women. In Kentucky specifically, we're 5th highest in the nation for child abuse cases. So, when we talk about ending child marriage, that absolutely is one pathway to get rid of that legalized abuse. But going back to what you were talking about, as far as, what about these kids that are in these crappy situations that think that that would be their ticket out? We have to be able to educate them specifically. And I will tell you, there are some really great organizations that do trainings for kids. I actually am on the board with a Catholic Charities initiative here in Louisville. They're called the Bauquita Empowerment Initiative, and they educate girls about that are susceptible to exploitation through these groups called My Life, My Choice. And then I have my own training that I do with both youth and adults called the Trust Blueprint, which is all about identifying your attachment patterns and being able to pair that cognitive recognition of your behavioral motivation with the emotions that you're experiencing. I'm on the board with the Juvenile Justice.
Looking into your teaching and hosting these now.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
The Juvenile Justice Advisory Board here in Kentucky, I'm on the board for that as well. And, I will never forget sitting in our retreat last year and having this 16-year-old kid in there who had been incarcerated. And one of my colleagues asked him, at what age would it have made a difference if someone had reached you at that time? And he flat out said, you need to start talking to kids when they're 10 and 11 years old. Yeah, because by the time he was 13, he was already, his trajectory had been laid out because of the things he struggled with. And that was so powerful to me because it's the same. We need to teach parents how to talk to their kids. We also need to be able to teach educators the same, and also to reach kids directly. Kids aren't stupid, and they can understand so much more than what we give them credit for. We just have to be willing to listen. Yeah.
I was a speaker for the San Diego Police Foundation, and I taught internet safety for about 6 years. And the disparity in recognizing what was going on between parents, teachers, and the kids was bizarre. I mean, I have to tell you, I was shocked. I had 4 or 5-year-old little girls come up to me and tell me they were playing Roblox, and were called the B word, and were stalked by older men, and they had no one to talk to. And what's the number one reason kids wouldn't talk to their parents? What do you guys think?
They're afraid they're going to get in trouble.
They're afraid they're going to get their phones and their iPads
taken away. Yeah.
Number one. And therefore, these kids at 4 and 5 years old are isolated in their experience from any adult guidance because they don't tell anyone. And so I went into the schools and I would tell the students or the parents and teachers, we need to have a tech talk Tuesday, just coming up with something cute.
Yeah.
They all roll their eyes and their head at me. I said, your students are coming up to me and asking for guidance and support. They're being assaulted online, virtually chased after, called names, lusted after, in our word, but you know what I mean? Like older people stalking these little kids and the young girls and the boys and blackmailing them. And there's all this sexual undertone online. These kids have no one to talk to. And the students want the teachers want you to come in and talk to the kids, and the parents want you to come and talk to them, but the parents wouldn't show up for the parent presentations. Mm-hmm. The teachers rolled their eyes at me on my Tuesday Tech Talk ideas. And I was like, I don't know how you guys are going to handle this, because these kids need people to educate and guide and comfort them in this very scary situation. And also not take their phones and tech away. Like, be a grown-up about being a grown-up, right? And so I would imagine that all these kids you guys are working with too, means what a blessing they have for you. And I want to just say, like, I think we need so much more of that. Direct contact with these kids where they're not being judged or criticized or getting in trouble because of what they're going through. You can just be that person.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what kids need. I mean, the old adage, it takes a village, it truly does. And let's be honest, so much of that is because a lot of us adults are walking around with our own trauma histories that we may or may not be on a healing path for.
Right. 100%.
Mm-hmm.
So, can you tell us a little bit more about your own, is it Revive?
Yes. Yeah. Revive Collective. So I started Revive in response to the need, just as we were talking about, to really be able to educate people, because I do believe that once we can start getting real about recognizing our own behavioral patterns and what we're experiencing within our own emotional state, then we can start breaking those cycles within our families. We become better partners, we become better parents, we become better friends, better colleagues, but we have to be willing to do the work ourselves. And so that was the original reason that Revive started. We do have the advocacy arm as well. Right now I have it focused specifically on Kentucky. It's called the Rise Kentucky Coalition. And the RISE stands for something. It's Reclaim Innocence, Stop Exploitation. That's something that is very important to me, to be able to give kids lives that they don't have to spend decades recovering from. And then we also, again, have the podcast that I think I mentioned to Velas previously. It's called The Last Generation. And again, it's all about becoming the last generation to carry forth that trauma and pain. So that's on all the channels that could possibly hold podcasts, except for Substack, which I am going to start using thanks to this wonderful technology that y'all introduced me to.
Yeah, great.
It's amazing. It's been such a game changer for us. It just goes out to YouTube and Spotify and all the places, Apple.
Yeah, it puts it out there. So it's we really appreciate it. Just makes it really easy.
I'm all about efficiency. So yeah, this is exciting.
Can you tell us a little bit about your book also? So I'm going to get you, so just so for folks who are listening, we'll include the link for your book, Donna, for your advocacy work. I'd love any articles or anything you want to share with us. We'll create a link. We'll create a resource page so people can do some of their own independent research. I know there's a lot of people that are going to be shocked by the things that you've been saying and the acceptance of child marriage in the US. And obviously you're fighting for it now, but we'll tell everybody. But I'd love for you to just give us a little bit about your book.
Yeah, thank you. So my book is called Ashes to Flame, Transforming Trauma into Purpose. I don't know if you can kind of see it back there over my
Yeah.
shoulder. That's the book cover for it. And it is my personal story of surviving some really horrific forms of abuse as I was younger and, during my teenage years, and going on to become an advocate for change. You'll find if you even read just the very first part, the introduction, I open up with the story of how a woman that was another advocate chastised me when I first started speaking out in advocacy, saying, "Do you really think you're going to be able to change laws?" And I used that because that level of being underestimated is something that I had experienced my entire life. And so that became this huge launch pad for me to be able to reclaim my power and say, forget anyone else that's going to try to stand in my way and tell me what I am and am not capable of. I'm the one that gets to decide that. So it is a heavy read. I go into a lot of details about my life, but I also know that for me, being able to hear from other survivors has been really helpful with that recognition. And that's the reason I included the detail that I did. So I hope that those who read it are able to find hope and find their own ignition of their own inner fire to transform their pain into the purpose that they feel called for.
Where is it available?
Yeah.
It's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. If you Google it and type in my name, it'll pop up.
Okay, good. Yeah, we'll attach your Amazon link, or if there's another direct link you'd like us to share, we'll do that too. No problem. Yeah. So are you out and about speaking in organizations, and when you go into an organization, are you specifically focused on child marriage, or is it overcoming trauma? Like what would be like your keynote?
So mine is really focused on overcoming trauma, specifically related to complex PTSD, which is like a whole nother podcast episode that we could talk through. So there's a big difference between shock trauma and complex PTSD. But it always is rooted in how do we take these experiences and in our own recovery from them, transform them into something that becomes blessings for the next generation. So that I am very active speaking at a ton of different organizations, interviews like this, and of course through my own podcast. So I welcome folks to get in contact with me.
Okay, yeah, we'll provide all that info.
I want to, before we wrap up, I want to do a little call to action, and I'm going to read down where we are with each state that has passed. And if I don't say the name of your state, please get active if you can. So briefly, Delaware became the first U.S. state to completely ban child marriage by setting a minimum age for marriage to 18 with no exception. Following Delaware, the states that have enacted similar bans prohibit marriage before 18 with no exception are New Jersey in 2018, Pennsylvania in 2020, Minnesota in 2020, Rhode Island in 2021, New York in 2021, Massachusetts in 2022, Vermont 2023, Connecticut 23, Michigan 23, Washington 24, Virginia 24, New Hampshire 24, DC, Maine, Oregon, and Missouri, all in 25. Wow. So as of March of 2026, 16 states and Washington, D.C. have fully banned child marriage with no exception. We have 34 states to go.
Mm-hmm.
So
I don't know if I don't know. I have these mixed emotions. We're like, 34 states still haven't gotten behind this, but also kudos to the ones that have.
Just last week alone, 4 states, including Kentucky, heard argument on Senate. They were all Senate floor, right? Mm-hmm. None of them have gone to House yet. So last week, Ohio, Oklahoma, Colorado, and Kentucky heard testimony, and now it goes to House. and goes to the House, and then it gets to go to the governor, who can veto it. So I know a couple of those governors will pass, but I don't know about Oklahoma and Colorado. I know Kentucky and Ohio.
Okay.
Actually,
So the call to action, then, what's your call to action? It sounds like Colorado and Oklahoma need people to get out there, speak up, share their stories. Like, what are some of the avenues that they can take to support?
Well, certainly raising their voice and making their opinion heard to their legislators. However, I'm talking about all of the states that may not have anything on the books to look at. There are 4 states that have a 0 minimum age to marry. So it's critical that people start speaking up in those states. But you can also look up in a lot of states. For instance, I talked about this. I think Vanessa and I, you were talking about this. We were talking about in Georgia, the minimum age to marry is, if you Google it, 18. However, if you're emancipated, you can get married before that. So I don't know what that means exactly, because if you get legally emancipated, do you really have all of your rights? Can you sign a lease? Can you hire an attorney? Can you go to a battered woman's shelter?
Yeah, that's my first question. It sounds like you don't have hardly any rights when you're an emancipated person.
And even thinking in terms of being able to enter into a lease, let's just say, be a devil's advocate for a moment and say that that's true. Apartment complexes have a right based on income to determine if a resident or prospective resident is able to afford that place. What 16-year-old has a down payment and guaranteed income for an apartment complex ongoing? It's not sustainable. And so, yes, as we, have said, and it's such a good point to bring up, emancipation without specifically enumerated rights is meaningless. It's just a word on paper that adults use to comfort themselves about egregious decisions being made on behalf of children.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, I think one of the things, and we can wrap up, I don't want to keep out anybody, but I just want to acknowledge that I had no idea. And I think I'm kind of a smart, educated person, right? I just had no idea that this was a thing.
Yeah.
And I want people that are listening to be with your shock and be with your hurt and your pain about this, whether it's something you experienced or you've never experienced and you're like, oh my God, but then do something about it. Contact us, reach out to us on the Blooped Podcast through Substack or on YouTube. Vilas, Donna, me, you can reach out to any one of us if you want to get involved. You want support, we're here. We can provide resources and point you in a direction that can continue your education or point you in the direction of some kind of support if you're experiencing anything in this realm and you don't know what to do. So we're here for you, whoever's out there listening. Yeah, thank you both for your work. I haven't done anything, so I'm just squatting on this one. Thank you both for your
voice. Thanks.
Exactly.
Thank you for your service, your love, and your fierce dedication to this.
Thank you so much, Donna, for being here. I'm 100% a fan of yours. You are amazing and an inspiration, and I can't thank you enough for your advocacy.
Likewise. Thank you so much. And it's truly an honor to be able to be with you ladies and to be able to have this platform to speak on today.
Fangirl too now.
Ditto. Like I said, mutual admiration society.
Absolutely. I love that. One of the things I'm passionate about is bringing play to women in different capacities. I've never worked with women who've dealt with a lot of trauma directly, but I have found that play and the somatics of it, movement, expression, have been so healing and so powerful. And while it doesn't directly heal the trauma, it is an avenue for folks to continue healing by, again, expressing themselves in ways they never could, and also reorienting the body to joy. And
yes. Oh, I love that.
Yeah, that was my experience. So I'm also offering out there in the world that working with, I wouldn't work with a group of trauma, but like specifically trauma healing, because I don't have the education, but to support you in any way or support some of the work you're doing or bring some of the stuff that I'm doing to what you're doing. I would just love to bring it out to more women. So I'm just putting that out in the ethers.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. Yes, let's definitely stay in contact. I can think of so many ways we can work together on that.
That's awesome.
Awesome. Okay, you guys, what's next? Really quick. I just want to know what's on your agenda. What's the next step? And then we're going to let us all fly off into the ethers. What's your next steps that need to be taken?
Well, we keep fighting. It's always, little inching forward, and then these tiny little steps get us to monumental victories each time it's passed in any state. All of us are just like so relieved, and it's very emotional, and it's just, you got to just keep putting one foot in front of the other and fighting the good fight, because ultimately all of us are in charge of what is happening to the foundation of the next generation. And so I love that I can identify myself as the last generation of something. I'm all in.
Yes.
Let's not ever see this happen again.
Yeah. Aho, amen, all of that. Yes.
Exactly. I love that. That's beautiful.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so very much for your service and what you're doing. Thank you, Donna, for taking the time to come be with us for an hour here, and all the work that you've done out there. As I speak for so many women and girls, we both do, but thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you all for everything that you're doing as well. It's truly been a pleasure, and I can't wait to continue working with you all in some capacity going forward.
Of course.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Bye. Bye.